Good day, everyone, especially to you, Madam. So today, I am going to discuss about post-colonial criticism. And here's the slides of my report. Post-colonial criticism. What is post-colonial criticism? It is similar to cultural studies, but it assumes a unique perspective on literature and politics that warrants a separate discussion. It is specifically post-colonial critics are concerned with literature produced by colonial powers and works by those who were colonized. So, post-colonial theory criticism focuses on relationships between colonizers and colonized people. It is also analyzed whether a text upholds or subverts colonial ideas. So, here is some definitions of post-colonial. So it brings a focus to civilization that were once under colonial rule. It also looks at the economic and cultural influences that permeate a society, therefore colonizing different cultural aspects. So let's move on today slightly more in depth. So as society changes after the influence of colonial rule, this type of criticism, while being applicable to many different pieces of literature, example, all-American literature, it is slightly more specific than literature pertaining to a once colonized society. So this approach brings more of a focus on the effects of colonial rule on the society. So a widely used example of a piece of post-colonial literature is China Achebe's Things Fall Apart. So what does this all really mean? So someone specializing in post-colonial studies can focus on many different disciplines like political science, cultural studies, and literature. So for our purpose, we are going to focus on the more intangible effects of a society after it is colonized. So here is the Tempest. So while it isn't necessarily considered a piece of colonial literature, it can be seen through a post-colonial perspective. So there are some aspects to focus on. So one is a slave or master relations. Then two is how the native inhabitants are affected by the invasion of the outsider. So let's start first day master or slave relations. So Prospero the others as his slaves. So he is the quintessential ruler of all on the island. So living under the impression that he is creating the most ideal living conditions while being completely obviously to the needs and desires to others, Prospero and Caliban shows a slight resistance. So showing that a rebellion against a self-proclaimed power. So the alienation of the natives. So Caliban and Sycorax as a power native is the eliminated, much like any colonization. Caliban is young and impressionable, therefore was enslaved and was expected to assimilate to the culture of Prospero. So, focusing on the omnipresent power struggles between the cultures and the intersection of cultures, which results in multiculturalism and polyvalency of culture. So, post-colonialism analyzes the metaphysical, ethical, and political concerns about cultural identity, gender, nationality, race, ethnicity, subjectivity, language, and power. So, here's the influence of the post-colonial. So, by the post-structuralist and postmodern idea of decentering, post-colonial literary criticism undermines the universalist claims of literature, identifies colonial sympathies in the canon, and replaces the colonial meta-narratives with counter-narratives of resistance. So, by writing history and asserting cultural identities through strategies such as separatism, nativism, cultural syncretism, hybridity, mimicry, active participation, and assimilation. So, backed by an anti-essentialist notion of identity and culture. It critiques cultural hierarchies and the Eurocentricism of modernity. So here are some characteristics of post-colonialism. So first, use of detailed descriptions of people, places, and criticism towards stereotype, inaccuracies, and generalization. So the second one, use of colonizers or tongue or direct to demonstrate the language that was forced upon them. The third one, use of colonial art forms or incorporate their style, structure, and themes such as poetry. So here's the major theoretical works in post-colonial theory included The Reach of the Earth, 1961 by Frantz Fanon. So according to his work, criticizes the nature of colonialism and how it is essentially destructive. He depicts its societal effects and how it harms the mental health of the native peoples who were subjugated into colonies by saying such dehumanization is achieved with physical and mental violence. The second one, Orientalism, 1978 by Edward Said. He said that Orientalism is focused on criticizing stereotypically boundaries that were drawn between the East and West, specifically the Middle East. In Other Worlds, 1987 by Gayatri Spivak. The Empire Writes Back, 1987 by Bill Ashcroft et al. Nation and Narration, 1990 by Homi Kibaba, and Culture and Imperialism, 1993 by Edward Said. So let's move on to the literature. It's literature. So indigenous people from previously colonized and marginalized countries have increasingly found their voices, attempting to assert their own visions, tell their own stories, and reclaim their experiences and histories. So the post-colonial theorist enters their text through a specific critical lens or a specific way of reading a text. The critical lens, post-colonial theory or post-colonialism, asks the reader to analyze and explain the effects that colonization and imperialism or the extension of power into other nations have on people and nations. So here's the effects of colonization. So as I mentioned that post-colonialism asks the reader to enter a text through the post-colonial lens. The chart will help you see how to approach a post-colonial reading of a text. So you would look for the effects of colonialism and how they are addressed through the plots, settings, and characters' actions. As we can see, the world, it is as others mentality, the humanization of colonizer peoples or colonized peoples, distorted worldview. For nation, it is a value shifts, loss of identity, challenges to faith, language, or politics. And also for person, the humanization of self, inability to support or protect self or family, and self-doubt. That's all. Thank you and God bless.